Right, members. Comments?
Thank you, Chairman. I think I would firstly say that Mr Brooks' use of language is entirely inappropriate. It's offensive and it is not called for. He doesn't help his own cause and he's done himself absolutely no favours at all by being offensive to an officer of the council. Not one officer actually, but two officers. First point. Now moving on to the application. We get two types of applications here, one, if I can say, for buildings and one for trees. Buildings we have a set of rules for and we can apply an interpretation of those, but we have a fairly strict set of rules to go by. Trees, we don't so much. We are dependent on the experts. And the experts, in our case, is Paul. And I would find it very difficult to move away from the recommendation of the experts in this matter. I am not qualified to say whether that tree is dangerous, about to fall down, diseased or whatever. So I think in these instances I am dependent on our tree expert. And I've read this and quite clearly I think amenity is a word that comes up regularly, and I guess that is in the regulations, the amenity value of a tree. So I can find no way to go against the recommendation that Paul has made and the recommendation in the report.
Thank you, Chairman. Really, I suppose I want to echo exactly what Councillor Ford said. I found Mr Brooks offensive and unnecessary. I think the name calling of an officer is totally unnecessary and certainly doesn't help the cause whatsoever. Our officer, Mr Johnson, is a professional officer who does an excellent job. We hear of the various works that he does over the years, and all I can say is he's a very professional officer and certainly doesn't need that kind of comment coming out. With regards to the application itself, I'm more than happy. I've visited the site to have a look at the tree. There is amenity value to it. So my view is it's a healthy tree, so it remains. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I would agree with the comments that other members have made at the start of what they've said, and I will leave that at that point. I think what might have been helpful in the report is that as this went to appeal, we've got no real mention about what the inspector said and how he looked at it on the last occasion. And I think that might have been helpful for us to make a decision of how he saw the tree, because obviously is the situation at the moment is that Mr Brooks sees it in one way, Paul sees it in a different way. The inspector, who's independent of everybody, would have looked at it and made comments about the state of that tree and what have you. Now that would have been, I think, quite helpful to have actually seen and heard. Now whether we can have any comments from that now, it might help us to make up a decision based on what we see today, what the inspector saw 2 years ago, and be fair to everybody concerned.
Paul, do you have any comments on?
Yeah, I apologise for that omission. In simple terms, obviously the report is still publicly available. The appeal inspector dismissed it on the grounds that the tree was unsafe due to its lean or its condition, found no defects with the tree, normal risk of failure, and found the tree was otherwise safe and healthy. And in terms of the lean, some of the ancillary issues about cleaning up didn't add any weight to those. And in terms of its amenity value, which isn't defined in the Act, Mr Brooks is absolutely right. I think we understand what it is. Certainly in planning terms, we have to obviously make sure we articulate that correctly to the public. But a large, prominent tree, as the picture shows, it clearly fulfills the criteria to be worthy of a TPO, and the appeal inspector found in favour of that and dismissed it on both counts.
Yes, I know this tree well as I live around the corner in Highlands Road. I think it does add to amenity. The presumption is that trees remain unless there is clear sign of dead wood or dangerous branches, in which case, in consultation with the council's arboriculturalist, an agreement can be reached to do such works as required to a tree. As most members know, I've got five fine oak trees on my land, and I cherish them, and I would be horrified if anything happened to them. As I've also said, trees are like children and need looking after, and it may be that there is an argument in consultation with Mr. Johnson for doing some work on the trees. But as it stands now, I would certainly support the officer recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It seems to me really quite simply that the comparative photographs that we've seen today show no appreciable change from those we saw 2 years ago, and therefore no appreciable change with the reasoning of our decision and the appeal decision 2 years ago, and therefore I will go along with the recommendation today.
Councillor.
Just one technical question, Chairman. Trees of this sort, the canopy is normally equivalent to the root. Sorry, I was saying if it was an oak tree, the canopy would be equate to the root pattern underneath. Is it the same with a horse chestnut?
Yeah, not quite. I mean, roots from trees in a normal situation will try and root freely in a radial pattern. In urban areas, they're very much going to be constrained by what we do around them. So obviously the trees probably sat along Catisfield Road is quite an established road. We know that the 3 properties that are there were built, I think 40 odd years ago when the old house was knocked down. So that will affect, the driveways will affect the rooting pattern, but there's in principle a similar amount below ground as you see above, but it's in a very different way because it actually spreads out a long way and it doesn't actually go as deep as we think. But if structures are built correctly, particularly dwellings, they're not going to be adversely affected by trees. The tree was there first. No one's dismissing there is some minor damage to the wall. As outlined, we can see the cracks in the wall. The issue is whether the wall is no longer viable as a structure, and my view is that it isn't. And we can see the photos; it's barely out of alignment. Maybe a little bit of minor maintenance will stop weather exacerbating those small cracks. The driveway, I don't know if it was laid up at that angle against the tree. Obviously, there's some distortion there and some damage, and no one's dismissing the the incredible mess that some of these trees create. It's certainly not something that just there's an issue with horse chestnuts. Oaks this year have been prolific in terms of how much acorns they've generated, and they do cause a lot of mess, and depending on people's circumstances that may be more or less of a burden, but in simple terms it's generally classed as part of living with trees, and certainly not a reason for removing a tree of this stature.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, Chairman, there seems to be no substantial change from the time when the inspector made his decision. Presumably the inspector is being described as loose with the truth. I could not support the application and suggest it's refused.
Right. I think I'm disappointed that Mr. Brooks took the attitude he did. I've known Paul Johnston for many years, and he's a highly qualified officer who looks after thousands of trees across this borough in a very proper manner. And it's just bad that these comments were made, and I'm sorry for you, Paul, that you had to put up with that. From my own point of view, I mean, I look very carefully at the pictures, and there does not appear to be any change either in the lean or the ground heave. As Councillor Davis said, I've got some very large trees in my garden and I have to clear up after them. But I wouldn't think of taking them down just because there's a mess. There's always a mess. Every winter, every storm, they shed branches, and I have ground heave because I've got different species of trees which the ground heave is greater. But I wouldn't remove them for that purpose. So I think I agree with the officer's report, and if I can have a proposal and a second for the recommendation, that would be great. Right, proposed by Councillor Manbury, seconded by Councillor Cartwright. Those in favour, please show. That's unanimous.
I'd just like to respond to you, Sunshine.
Oh,
For you,
Mr. Brooks.
for him to question my integrity.
Mr. Brooks.
But apparently it's not good for me to question his. It's not. I'm not here to win a popularity contest. I'm here to tell the truth. And he's a stranger to it. Believe me.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. You don't like the truth, and you don't like it straight, that's your problem.